That's how stubborn I am. It takes me 3.5 years to figure things out.
Welcome to How Did We Get Here, the podcast where each week our two talking heads, being myself, Jess Bost,
and Mark Newfield,
bring on guests to learn more about their past 5 jobs before landing where they are today.
Because, as you know, life is super simple, straightforward, and never makes people ask, wait, you did what?
Join us for an honest convo on career exploration, overcoming setbacks, considering when to pivot, and offering encouragement on how to find value in your career and life choices.
And with that, let's ask the question.
Holy crap,
how did I get here?
Together.
And we're back, folks. Today, we're chatting with Van Smith, an estate planning attorney here in Virginia. At least I'm here in Virginia. Jess is in Augusta, Georgia. He has just an amazing story. He started his firm with nothing but a laptop and an iPhone. And I know many of you have probably done this. Still, it's quite a story. His firm now has about 30 people, roughly 10 attorneys. That's not too bad for somebody who didn't know what entrepreneurship was when he started. At least that's what he says. I would say to you, sort of, he didn't know. I would say to you, wait till you hear his story. Because in his case, he didn't know what he did know.
His journey of resilience and family support and learning to embrace the chaos and being that Swiss Army knife, man, it was just, the story itself is a roller coaster. The emotions I felt when he was telling it, I was on a roller coaster. There were several moments where tears are running down my face, several moments where I can't wipe the smile off my face. His story was amazing. He has so much wisdom to share. I think just because of sharing his story, it's not like I didn't ever feel like he was sitting on a throne saying, I have all this wisdom to share. It was just coming out of him as he's talking about how he lived through and made it through the experiences that he had. And, we'll get into some of those things today. I think anyone who's had to ever figure it out or has that relatable experience of, wow, I figured that thing out. And I didn't even know that I could or would, is really, they're just going to appreciate what Van has to share.
That is true. I think you will appreciate it. And once again, the role of luck here is pretty amazing. He when he was a young man, before he became an attorney, he got to sit in the office of a gentleman named Dennis Belcher. If you listen to the whole interview, you'll catch this. Dennis was one of the premier estate planning attorneys in the country. He worked for Elin Woods, for example, and a whole lot of other famous people. And Van got to kind of learn at his feet because his mom worked for Dennis. But when Dennis got started, he had no clients. He didn't have a business background. Yes, he'd been an attorney. He'd been a fundraiser at the University of Virginia. But what he did have was courage and audacity, right? And he had those experiences in the Army. And also, hopefully I'll get this right, recovery from hydrocephalus and some very serious foot surgery. So he did have some courage, but not a whole lot else.
I guess people would want to know, who is this redheaded guy?
I think that's a good way to do it.
Yeah, who is this redheaded guy? Why is he at the party? So I operate, I'm sitting here today in my law firm in Richmond, Virginia. I started that firm 14 years ago in January. It will be 14 years with a laptop and iPhone and no clients. So I have what I call riding the tiger, which is another way of saying the entrepreneurial journey. I call riding the tiger. So I've ridden the tiger for 14 years, and it has slowly grown to now there are approximately 30 people here, 10 attorneys, the rest support staff in 4 principal areas: family law, estate planning, which is where I practice, estate litigation, business planning. And then we just opened a real estate closing and title company this year that is already growing to 3 full-time folks. So I'm the sole owner. We do have attorneys that are now in management and leadership, but I'm the sole owner of the firm. So I also can relate to that with your listeners who are business owners or maybe thinking about starting a business. I didn't grow up with entrepreneurship around me. My mother and father were not business owners. They were W-2 employees. My mother was a church secretary who became a church administrator. My father worked as a used car salesman and then went to work at DuPont in factory shift work until his retirement 30 years later. My mother got a GED. My father dropped out of college. And so they were both of fathers who were dealing with alcoholism and routine unemployment. And so there was a lot of instability in their homes, and that sort of drew them together and then made them endeavor to say, we don't know how we're going to fix this, but we're not going to do what they did. And so
I know, right? It's a perfect example of diving in head first and really just figuring out as you go. He struck me as someone who has this mentality of don't overthink it, just do it type of guy. And he shared a little bit about that in the counter he had in the coffee shop with the officer. And
What a story that is.
well, that was a story. And, he's walking back toward his office and he's like, what am I doing? And
Folks, you have to listen to this. This is how you get from a coffee shop in Williamsburg to Iraq.
That's right. Yeah. And, I think the lesson of that is something that a lot of people could maybe add to their own way of doing things. Maybe not all things should be done without fully thinking through, but his ability to pivot has really, like you said, landed him in an amazing variety of roles and allowed him a lot of experiences that he wouldn't have otherwise had. And some of that, I think, while it may not have directly come from his parents, he talks about how his parents gave him those strong values. They may not have had the business or the CEO mentality. He may not have grown up watching that. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs grow up seeing their parents as entrepreneurs. And we give maybe a little bit too much credence to that experience in order to be a good entrepreneur, because he didn't see any of that. But he did talk a lot about how his parents gave him strong values and a safe place. And I think if we're honest, that's more than half the battle in life, to have that groundedness and that support from your family, and to know who you are going into life, and to have that as part of your experience growing up.
I have to say, I mean, as I've aged and seen things, I see that as well as immensely important. That level of support. His parents, whether intentional or not, broke the cycle of poverty and instability that they had faced. And they gave him a foundation and a level of confidence where he was like, I'm just going to go out and do this.
We don't know how we're going to fix this, but we're not going to do what they did. And so that was a steady and consistent enough basis for me and I'm the oldest of 5 children. We have all now gone to college and are all functional adults with families of our own. And so my parents deserve a lot of credit.
Your parents broke the cycle.
Yeah. So I could also speak to that, like what I saw them do so well without any guidance or background. And so they did that. And now I've carried it further with entrepreneurship and kind of reclaiming the financial security that they always sort of struggled with. Even though they had amazing parenting skills, they were amazingly stable, supportive, loving, but that was always a challenge. And so I've sort of built on that foundation they gave me. So I'm grateful for that.
As we mentioned his story, how he ended up in Iraq and what he did there was just incredible. How he got there, what he did while he was there, the lessons he learned, that high pressure environment, how to problem solve creatively and take responsibility. Those experiences shaped his leadership in ways that maybe I don't even think he could have ever experienced stateside. I mean, it's hard.
Not in 7 months.
Hard to replicate an experience like that when you're being bombed in the middle of the night and then you have to wake up and do a 16 hour day like he talked about. It's, as you mentioned, the luck in being placed and getting to that environment. I think also that nuance of luck where preparation meets opportunity, because he had the luck, if you will call it, of being in college when 9/11 happened, I was in college as well, so that was a relatable experience for me. What he did with that was so different than what I did. He turned into and toward understanding the dynamics of the Middle East and learning everything he could about that situation. I ran away from it. I was like, oh man, that is definitely not something that I want to be anywhere close to, anywhere involved in. He turned toward it. And then that was the one thing that in this conversation at the coffee shop with the officer gave him the window of opportunity that he had to go to Baghdad. So, that preparation meets opportunity. That's also a version of luck for him. That was that piece of luck that really stood out to me. And as crazy it was his story. It really is what happened to him.
They were 17 or 18-hour days, 6.5 days a week.
Yeah.
And we had an afternoon off to do our laundry. And then, but in reality, there was nothing else to do but work. I mean, you couldn't go off to a movie. There wasn't, a bar, a restaurant that a 22-year-old could go to. You couldn't drink alcohol. I mean, they were definitely smuggled in and it was definitely there, but it wasn't officially there. And I don't want to exaggerate this or, have any allegation of stolen valor. I was a civilian, a Department of Defense civilian in Iraq, but I was bunking next to service members. And about once every few weeks, a rocket would come in and hit close enough that would send us tumbling out of our beds and throwing the cot over us to shield from potential debris with the loudspeaker saying, "Take cover." And I remember feeling the force of that rock propelled grenade once it impacted, kind of rippling through. And what I'm told now, by physicians is that's sort of the force of being hit by a football linebacker, but it's just an invisible, like sound blast that kind of hits you when a missile hits close. I remember I volunteered with a nonprofit in Bosnia for a summer in undergrad. Very, very random and equally as unique and lucky to get that. The war was still going on in Kosovo, and I remember I went there to teach English to war traumatized orphans in Zenica, Bosnia, outside of Sarajevo, the summer after my freshman year of college. And I remember them describing missiles and how you knew if it was close or not to you. You could hear the missile, and if it went like a whistle, you knew you were good. You didn't have to worry. But if you heard the rotation of the missile or the RPG, if you were close enough to hear the rotation, you knew this was a bad day for you and you had to take cover. And I remember I could hear the rotation. So that was something I took with me to Iraq. So fast forward, Iraq. I'm coming in to be, quote, the chief of staff to the head of internal security. I was 22. In hindsight, too young for that position. And so doing your best, but you're in a highly politicized environment with people that are far more experienced in life, in the world, in their own careers. And it was an international coalition with tremendous political tensions, lots of egos, lots of deadlines, lots of bad food, lots of poor sleep, lots of testing of you. I remember about every other week we tried to get an office picture, and we never got a full office picture to my memory because every week someone was either injured or unavailable because of a related injury. So that was the office environment. Highly intense, very smart people, very accomplished people. And here's this 22-year-old that's sort of observing and watching it all. I became, in the midst of that role, a operations officer in the civil defense. And that's how I got this fire hat. So what that means is I became an operations officer to help re-equip, retrain, and rehabilitate the fire and ambulance service. So I left the chief of staff role and became this operational assistant, if you will, or advisor to the fire chiefs of Iraq to help rebuild, re-equip approximately 214 fire and ambulance stations that had been looted to the stud. So even the hinges off the door were gone when we got there because it was such impoverished conditions, such dire conditions. So there were no ambulance, no fire service. So we had to re-equip, rebuild, retrain, and personnel. And there were every problem imaginable, like okay, imagine having to rebuild a fire service, but there's no direct deposit system because they don't have bank accounts. So how do you pay them nationwide? 19,000 civil defense officers, fire and ambulance workers. How do you get them paid without a functional banking system? So you have to think through all these hard problems. How do we get fire trucks that do not exist into a country in a war zone and get those functionally responding to fires in a way that helps the people while being shot at? All these things are being talked about and bandied about. So I turned 23 in that environment. To answer your question, a long way around the barn to answer that question. But I just think that gives you a picture of what I'm seeing in my mind as I answer it. And so what that gave me was a sense that everyone was trying to figure it out, and there was no roadmap or instruction manual. So you had direct accountability for the outcome, but no way of knowing how to do it. So it was sort of like you're shipwrecked on an island.
Yeah, it's one of those things that if somebody could write a book about this, I mean, fiction, but it's not fiction. It's just not every day you hear an attorney, an estate planning attorney, talking about dodging rockets and rebuilding a government in a war zone during a war, thinking about multi-tool, pretty amazing. But again, what a preparation to go be an entrepreneur. He just didn't know he was getting that training.
Right.
I mean, thinking on your feet, getting something done in 7 months, right? As he says, I mean, they had money, they had tools, but they had nothing else. And they built all this from scratch. It's just amazing. So he got this toolkit for life that he keeps growing, right? He's taking that and doing something with it. And this is the entrepreneurial experience that he didn't even know he had when he got started.
Had I not had a pretty gritty upbringing, gritty in the sense, not from a lack of love, but from a lack of financial resources. You can't teach hungry. I was hungry from that. And then Iraq taught me to Swiss Army knife problems in high pressure environment. And then a few things that followed, working at a large law firm and then at UVA Foundation and being exposed to their way of thinking and management and refine the business acumen and what was needed at a consumer level and how to implement that at a consumer level. I don't think I would be here today with my own firm with 30 some folks had I not had Iraq, because what Iraq taught me was to have confidence in yourself, a faith in God, a confidence in yourself, and then just a belief that I'll figure it out.
Yeah, his mindset of, well, I'll figure it out, right? That was the mindset that was, I think, gifted to him. I don't know if he would consider it a gift and have considered it a gift in the moment of Baghdad. It definitely became a gift for him in that sense of entrepreneurship, leadership, resilience that he needed, his ability to just believe in himself to figure it out. That what gold, right? What a treasure to have as a mindset, especially as we all know, Baghdad wasn't the last hard experience that he would ever have in life. And knowing and carrying that with him going forward has, I'm sure, been just, like I said, a treasure to have when facing setbacks and meeting other challenges in life.
Yeah, you're shipwrecked on an island with a lot of smart people and a reasonable amount of personnel and money and equipment, but you're shipwrecked on an island having to figure it all out. And so what you take from that is this sense of whatever is hitting me, I'm going to figure out. I'm going to be multidimensional in how I think of creatively and solve the problem and own the outcome. And that all hits you with a high level of responsibility and stress build up and development at an early age. So it's a compression of maybe what a 10-year cycle of a business start to finish feels like. And you can get that compression in these crises moments in 6-7 months. So I got like a accelerated crash course in how to create and build a government and the apparatus that understands what people need from a basic core level when everything's taken away and there's just chaos. How do you restore order in a way that's sustainable with gigantic cultural, language, violence, and differences all around? All of that was to say, I don't think I would have been able to start my law firm.
Well, it's true, right? I mean, we all have things thrown at us. Sometimes something gets thrown on the wall and you have to figure out what piece of art you're going to make out of it. And as we learned from talking to Shayna, sometimes you just swing and hope you don't miss. And Van's ability to keep going, when things look impossible, I would call it humble self-confidence, is a reminder that confidence and resilience are keys in business and in life. And sometimes when you miss, you swing again. And you just have to keep going. Now, you don't have to, obviously. I mean, you can stop and say, I'm going to stay here, and this is who I am. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. That's just not Van. And believe me, it's worth listening to this entire interview. He's been through some amazing things. And if it leaves you with, hey, he did it, I can do it too, that's a good thing. Maybe for you, it might be the difference. Don't know.
And now we're walking out with boxes. So remember those New York scenes of people walking out of financial firms with boxes? I've lived that with 6-figure law student loans, no assets in my first week of marriage. So that was a lesson. What was that lesson? That ultimately I have to have responsibility and autonomy enough to control my economic and professional destiny. I cannot rely on a professional hierarchy corporate ladder to work that my whole career to find success. Now, I didn't learn that lesson right away. It took a while, but that's sort of the long-term lesson for me. That was what I had to learn. Other people, kind of like salmons, swimming upstream, they found their way back to other big firms. But for me, I was applying and they were thinking, well, this kid just came out of law school. He's been there a year and got laid off. There must be something wrong with him. Because in those days, lawyers had never experienced economic layoffs in the United States. From World War II to 2008, it had never happened. And so the concept was, if you were laid off, it was because you did something wrong and you're just not telling us. And that was painful to because lawyers, if they're anything, they're blunt. Some might even call them mean. And so here I am, a kid with no assets, no resources, no safety net, no parents to fall back on, and just being told no. And not only no, but there might be something wrong with you, and you're just not sharing that with us. But our job's not to figure that out. And so I went to work at UVA Foundation because my boss, the late Stuart Gamage, who I worked with at Wayne Mary, took a job at the UVA Foundation. She calls me up and says, I heard you were laid off. Come, it's not going to be much money, but we can pay an hourly rate part-time, and it'll keep the lights on and roof over your head. And while you figure things out.
I love that. Yeah.
And so I worked for less than a third of what I made at the big firm, part-time, and just sort of clawed my way up a brilliant, wonderful organization called the UVA Foundation. And the billionaire John Kluge had just given then UVA's largest gift, a $40 million gift with a 5,000-acre horse farm. And he challenged the university to build a Center for Interdisciplinary Studies for the University of Virginia. And so I went from working in a large law firm to living on site at this horse farm and helping Stuart convert this horse farm into a Center for Interdisciplinary Studies for UVA. And it was a wonderful place to wait out a very tough, hard recession. Mm-hmm. And all the while applying to big law firm jobs, thinking this is what I'm doing while I'm looking to get back into big law firm jobs. And what I've now realized was, no, life was telling me, we're taking you on a different path. And you're so hard-headed, we're going to keep you here. and you're going to keep hearing no until you hear the lesson. And so that was a 3.5 year. That's how stubborn I am. It takes me 3.5 years to figure things out. And Jess, in case you're wondering what it's like to be married to me.
Before we wrap up, I want to just say one more time, thank you, Van, for joining us, being willing to share some really deep, sincerely fragile parts of your story, could be, right? For you to offer to a group of listeners that you probably don't know. As I heard one time, I've carried it with me forever, that stained glass window can only be made from broken pieces of glass. And I think, the beauty that comes through that sometimes is, to me, many times a reminder that some of the most fragile pieces of our story, if we collect them and keep them and use them, they can be something really powerful and beautiful. And so I definitely felt that as we were listening to Van's story and his journey of breaking cycles and becoming that Swiss Army knife and staying humble, and all of that has just built him into someone that is remarkable and enjoyable and respectable. And good luck if you are listening, getting through it without tears. I didn't survive that challenge. I just thank you, Van. We appreciate you.
Yeah, there's a point in this story where I'm not often struck silent, but it certainly was. So thank you, Van, for coming and talking to us, for being who you are and being open about what you've been through. He's been through the highs and lows of business and war, and he certainly is on a high now, and much deserved. Nonetheless, he's humble. He's got a wonderful sense of humor. I think this story, will resonate with lots of viewers, and it takes me back to Aravin's story as well, which is similar in terms of one foot in front of the other one.
All right, Mark, shall we get into it?
With this one, that is super easy. Let's roll.
Yes, let's roll. All right. So part of Anne's story, as I was kind of thinking back on it, really made me think about how people often wait for the perfect moment in their financial journey instead of just starting where they are. So like in Van's case, and I think it was very early in our conversation where he talked about he started his estate planning firm with just a cell phone and a laptop. And that struck me, one, because we didn't know any of the context of his story yet. And so it felt a little unbelievable. But then as he started to add context in that backstory, it was like, okay, yeah, of course you just started this firm with your cell phone and your laptop because you believed that you could do it, right? You didn't have to amass all these resources to bolster your courage to begin this. You just believed that you could make it happen with what you had available to you. And I think that's could be a really helpful lesson for people who have this mentality or this mindset. And I'll even call myself out as a young 20-year-old. I didn't feel like I had enough to make a difference with saving or investing. Like I, would keep a couple $100 in my savings account as a young 20-year-old because, I needed to be able to dip into it if I overdrafted my checking account kind of thing, but investing wasn't really something that I was thinking much about. And I really, honestly, part of it was rooted in that mentality of what kind of a difference can I make when I'm making $21,000 a year, fresh out of college and not even able to pay my bills. So what would you say to someone who has a similar mentality? What if they feel like they don't have enough resources to make a difference for themselves now? And what are maybe some smaller things they could focus on and habits they could start to build today that would and do, we know now as financial planners, you having decades and decades of experience, longer than I do, it even more than I do. I wish I could go back and tell my 20-year-old self something different, but what would you say?
You've hit on it multiple times, but it's actually all about behavior and mentality. There are always obstacles to starting anything. Every single day, there's a reason why you can't do it today.
Mm.
And if you look at the long-term history of investing, and we've got these charts, I've got an index chart on my wall that goes up and to the right from 1925.
Yeah.
There are bullet points on that chart all over the place about days when, if you were thinking about it, you're like, today's not the day.
Yeah.
From the Great Depression to World War II to Nixon being tossed to today. There's probably somebody saying, oh my God, with the election, our world is going to hell in a handbasket. There are always obstacles to starting every single day. So that tells me that today is the day. Your mindset, like Van's, has to be today is the day. Today is the day I'm going to start this. No, I don't have clients. No, I don't have cash flow. I'm going to start this anyway. Now, first, this is not financial advice for you, merely my observations from, let's call it many years of being an advisor. Your ability to earn income for most people is your biggest asset. So the first thing you got to do is protect that. And as much as most folks hate insurance, this generally means life and disability insurance. May not. Maybe you just have a really good employment contract. Okay. But you got to make sure you have an income. If you don't have an income, you can't get anything done. And then I would say to you, if you don't have a savings habit, a consistent every week, every month, every paycheck savings habit, you have to develop that and develop that muscle. Now for you, $21,000 a year, maybe it was 25 cents a day that you automatically deposit in a savings account. Maybe it's $1 a day. Maybe it's $1 a week. Maybe it's $1,000 a week. That's all relative to you. But there's some number for most people. Now, there are truly people that can't afford to put a roof over their head, and this is obviously not going to apply to them. But there's some number that you won't miss. Fine, stuff it away. Do it automatically. Start building the muscle. It's not any different than when you started CrossFit, right?
Right.
Could you lift what you lift today when you started CrossFit? Of course not. You got started somewhere. Be simple and consistent about it. It's not complicated, right? Most of us have some level of quantitative skill. We like to make stuff complicated. This is all behavior, right? Create that cash reserve, because that cash reserve gives you emotional power. Once you have it, you're like, okay, I've got something to save me if I screw something up, or if the world does fall apart. Then you can start building towards other things. But it's no different than probably your daughter's volleyball coach, right? You got to do the fundamentals. You can't palm the ball. If you palm the ball, nothing else matters, right? It's an illegal touch.
Doesn't matter if it goes over. Yeah.
It's an illegal touch. Point is over. So really it is simple. I'm not saying it's easy. It's behaviorally hard, but it's simple.
I think embedded in there is similar to what you talked about, that one mistake that people make, like palming the ball in volleyball, right? That really frustrates or upsets or disintegrates that point or that part of the game. And so along with, I guess, kind of the balance of not just doing the right thing, there's also not doing the wrong thing. So you've got the right thing over here, which is saving what you can, figuring out what that number is putting that cash reserve aside. What is it that you see people in that situation, like one big mistake or a couple mistakes? What comes to your mind when I say mistake that people do in this situation? And especially when they are at that edge of starting something and feel like they need to have it all figured out.
So you just said it, right? It's overthinking and not getting started. When the best approach for most people, and again, this is not specific financial advice for you, but it is my opinion, the best approach for most, and from my experience, the best approach for most people for building wealth is systematic compounding, which means getting compounding started. And I will put this in all caps, and leaving it alone. Let it work.
Let it work.
Compounding takes time, which means patience and faith. Getting that started, my opinion, it's crucial. And therefore, not doing it over time is likely to be a significant error. And sure, there are other issues like taking excessive risk, trying to catch up, which, by the way, is because you didn't start compounding when maybe you could have, even if it was just a very small amount, or focusing, on investing and not protecting your business or personal assets and earning power. But waiting is the most common error I see. How many people do you talk to? I'm talking to you, the audience. I know Jess is going to agree. How many people do you talk to who say, I wish I'd done this sooner? Whether it's starting running a mile a day, eating better, sleeping more. I mean, I asked Phil Perlman this, right? How many people would he look at and say, you should have started sooner? And we all hear that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, to me, it's overthinking. Just get started.
What do you think is the biggest benefit for folks of just getting started?
Embedding habits in your everyday behavior so you don't think about it. You just do it. Hey, just do it. That might be a really good marketing phrase. We ought to try and pitch that to somebody.
I don't know, maybe a shoe company? What do you think?
Could be. Could be.
Yeah.
And then maybe we can, get a name like Shoe Dog.
Shoe Dog. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. There is, I think, nothing more powerful than a muscle that is fully strengthened. And let me break that down just a minute. To your point of just getting started, just starting to use your muscle, just flexing, just working. We talk a lot about when we're coaching people in the gym of how important it is not just to compound, but to make sure you are doing the full deadlift. A lot of people like to, pull that bar up and stop before they're fully standing up. And when
sounds like a pretty good way to pop a disc, but okay.
Well, maybe the weight's so heavy that they can't fully stand up with it. But what they're missing in that moment is that full extension of the muscle and the full range of motion of that muscle.
Mm-hmm.
And but the thing with working with younger kids is that they do it so intuitively. They actually, if you have somebody come into the gym who's never worked out before or who is young, the chances of them performing something better and doing the whole thing, even if it's a lighter weights, with using their full range of motion and muscle and their whole body engaged while they're doing it, is much greater because they haven't learned bad habits before.
Right.
And so,
and most of us, by the time we get to working, we have bad habits. We just don't know it.
Yeah.
Unless we were raised really well. That's a really good point.
Yeah.
So the first thing to do is to just get going, overcome that bad habit of I've got to get it right. Yeah. You don't have to get it right. You just have to start getting it.
That's right. And the sooner you start that, I think the more opportunity for success, not just because of time, but because you don't have bad habits to unlearn in that process. So that's all we got for you today, folks, other than a challenge to go listen to all of Van's story when it comes out. We hope that through this conversation and through his story mostly, because I think his story was great to stand alone without us chatting about it too. But we hope that gave you some food for thought and some, maybe even inspired you to embrace chaos if you have it in your life, and own that as part of your journey, and to keep moving forward, to keep doing that thing, and to not hesitate, to not miss an opportunity to get started.
For sure. So tune in next time. And by the way, if there's somebody you want to hear from, let us know.
Yeah.
If we have a connection, or we can make a connection, or you can make a connection for us. We love talking to different people. Coming up, we have a few more Support Canadians, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Which we desperately need in this country right now, I think. But anyway, it's another story. We've got lots of stories of resilience and people who have amazing wisdom they've developed. And we'll try and have a little fun. We'd love to have a review, even if you hated it. All feedback is a gift, a friend of mine liked to say. I like to say I never get lost. People are always telling me where to go. So I would, I could say, like many people would, pretend you didn't listen. But no. Tell us. We want to hear it.
Yeah.
because all of us want to get better at what we do. So we'll catch you later, by all means, but only 5 stars, only.
A big thanks to our amazing guests who agreed to join us on a journey through their career stories on How Did We Get Here?
If you've enjoyed the laughs, surprises, and unexpected turns, be sure to hit subscribe for more intriguing tales.
Your support means the world to us.
Until the next episode, keep asking, keep exploring, and keep wondering,
how did we get here?
This material is distributed for informational purposes only. Investment advisory services offered through Journey Strategic Wealth, a registered investment advisor registered with the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC. The views expressed are for informational purposes only and do not take into account any individual's personal, financial, or tax considerations. Opinions expressed are subject to change without notice and are not intended as investment advice. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. Please see Journey Strategic Wealth's Form ADV Part 2A and Form CRS for additional information. This podcast is not intended as and may not be considered to be investment advice and does not constitute a recommendation of any investment strategy or product for a particular investor. The information presented on this program is believed to be factual and up to date, but we do not guarantee its accuracy and it should not be regarded as a complete analysis of the subjects discussed. Discussions should not be construed as an offer to buy or sell or a solicitation of an offer to buy or sell the investments mentioned. Investors should consult a financial professional before making any investment decisions. The opinions are those of the host and interviewees at the time of the podcast recording and are subject to change. These comments should not be construed as recommendations, but as an illustration of broader themes. Forward-looking statements are not guarantees of future results. They involve risks, uncertainties, and assumptions. There can be no assurance that actual results will not differ materially from expectations. Investments involve varying degrees of risks, and there can be no assurance that any specific investment or strategy will be suitable or profitable for our client's portfolio. All investment strategies can result in profit or loss. Just Boss is an investment advisor representative of Wealth Tech Partners, LLC, DBA, Lake Avenue Financial, which is a registered investment advisor, and only conducts business in jurisdictions where it is properly registered or is excluded or exempted from registration requirements. Mark Newfield is an investment advisor representative of Journey Strategic Wealth, which is a registered investment advisor, and only conducts business in jurisdictions where it is properly registered or is excluded or exempted from registration requirements. Registration as an investment advisor is not an endorsement of the firm by securities regulators and does not mean the advisor has achieved a specific level of skill or ability. The firm is not engaged in the practice of law or accounting. You should always consult an attorney or tax professional regarding your specific legal or tax situation.